Hey everyone and welcome. Today you'll be learning how the pro player TenZ was able to achieve the first Valorant rank in North America. TenZ is a pro Valorant player for Cloud9 who also used to be a professional Counter-Strike player. In this guide, you'll find out the tactics, strategies, and techniques that he uses to ascend to this godlike status. Now, it's important to note that TenZ is actually a Viper one-trick. The reason why this is notable is that Viper isn't exactly considered a top-tier agent at the moment, with most pros and experts considering Viper to actually be on the weaker side. Well, that is, unless she's playing on the map Split, where many consider her to actually be top tier. And so this is what we'll be looking at today. TenZ playing Viper on the map Split, arguably her strongest map. I mean, even the solo queue player Defran plays Viper win on this map. So let's jump straight into it with TenZ solo queuing with Viper on the map Split. Starting with round 1, TenZ shows us one of his favorite smoke lineups to control mid on Split. He moves into this corner, aims at the top right corner of this sign, and runs forward and releases it. This smoke will land on the top of stairs, helping to gain control of mid and prevent any players from being picked off at the start of the round from a defender holding an angle. Most importantly though is how he's going for mid control on this map. Mid is the most important area of the map to control on Split since, well, just like the name of the map implies, once you gain control of it, you effectively split the defenders and isolate them to each bomb site. This can allow the attackers with very quick access to either A or B site rushes, where they can use their number advantage to overwhelm the defenders. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we see attackers make is stacking as 5 on the same point. This really isn't necessary, as 5 players will just begin walking over each other and getting in each other's way, especially with how tight the areas are in Valorant. We can see TenZ's team recognize they're making this mistake, so Raze moves to head to sewer to protect the flank. This concept of protecting the flank on attackers is extremely important. Notice how they have a tripwire watching for the potential B push. If this tripwire wasn't there or they didn't have a cipher, then it's most optimal to have 3 players attacking mid, with 1 watching for B pushes and 1 watching for A pushes. Now, the reason why protecting the flank is so important is that you don't just want to execute a super fast 5-man rush every single round as an attacker. Notice how slow TenZ is playing it. He's gaining control of mid and being patient looking for a pick. This is baiting utility from the enemy. We're seeing brimstone smokes go down along with the enemy Sage's wall. This is something so many players don't understand about attacking in Valorant. You almost always have to bait out the defender's utility first before you actually commit to an attack. We can see TenZ get a nice lurk through the smoke, resulting in a pick on the enemy Sage. With Sage dead, they move up to vents, again being patient and taking control of key areas of the map and not just full on rushing. There's plenty of time left in the round. Still, notice how much utility has gone down by the enemy, making it hard for TenZ to contribute to the fight or really see anything at all. And here's one trick: when there's a lot of smokes going down, is to take this time to watch your minimap. Your teammates are in different positions than you and can give you sight on the enemy. It's from doing this that TenZ spots all enemies on the minimap, and what does this mean? A site is completely open. Unfortunately, his teammates die right before they're able to rotate into vents. However, by using that earlier trick of watching the minimap, he now knows exactly where the last 2 enemies are, one bottom side of mid and one in B heaven. Take note of how he peeks it. He's minimizing how much he's exposing himself, since if he makes the common mistake of wide swinging, he'd expose himself to the enemy on B heaven. This allows him to win the 1v1 against Jett despite facing 2 enemies at once. The last enemy then pushes him through his Viper smoke and actually kills him. If we go back, there's something really valuable to learn from this. Notice how right before TenZ pushes out of vents that he reloads. Enemies can actually hear you reload in Valorant, and it's this reload sound that likely gave Brimstone the confidence to push through the smoke. Essentially, Brimstone has a much better idea of where Viper is due to the reload sound, whereas Viper hasn't heard Brimstone and is left having to watch almost the entire screen, guessing where he'll be. Now, heading into round 2, with his team losing the previous round, he'll need to save so that they can buy rifles on round 3. However, we see that he buys a sheriff. Well, this is because when you open the buy menu, you can see the minimum amount of credits you'll have next round. In this case for TenZ, it's 4,700 credits. With the sheriff costing 800 credits, that will leave him with 3,900 left. This is the key number you should all have memorized, as it's what lets you buy both full armor and an assault rifle like the Vandal or Phantom. So despite getting nothing done this round, by maximizing his economy, he still has a standard rifle buy heading into round 3. It's here in round 3 that we see the first reason why Viper is so strong on Split with this specific lineup with her wall. Match the top corner of this wall with the edge of these white lines. Then aim right here. You can use the minimap as a guide to make sure your wall goes into a heaven. This will block ramp and heaven and sets you up to take a site. Now, the enemy jet was killed playing up close in A main. Don't make the super common mistake of trying to push up ramp into A heaven. The point of this wall is to give you control of the A site. I want you to take this moment and think, where would the remaining enemies be playing? Well, it's currently standard for defending teams on split to play 1B, 2 mid, and 2A. It's typical for the A players to have one on the ramp and one in sight. Since Jet died, it means that it's likely the other A player is ramp or heaven. Additionally, we can expect a player from mid to rotate A, which would leave them in heaven. Anyone else rotating to A would have to go through CT spawn and end up at screens. Okay, so what does all this mean? Well, when Jet died, it likely means no one on the enemy team is playing A site, and so we just have to worry about ramp, heaven, and screens. This is why TenZ throws a Viper poison on screens. Then, what do you know? We catch an enemy pushed out of heaven on the rafter. And as TenZ moves into the site, he doesn't have to check behind him since he knows there shouldn't be any enemies playing there. His primary concern is heaven and screens. After the spike is planted, he holds a tight angle on screens with the op. The value of holding tight angles like this is not only that it can net him a kill, but just as important is that he'll get information on whether an enemy is screens and give him the option of falling back once he takes the shot. In the meantime, he's communicating to his teammates to watch heaven. He spots Raze on the minimap, but that's only one enemy, and he doesn't make the mistake of trying to help his teammates as they haven't died yet. He's still holding this angle as an enemy could still push through screens. He misses his shot on Sage, and at this point Raze died mid, and Cypher has shown rafters. Now, after TenZ misses this operator shot, I want you to tell me, what would you do next? He has to fall back, since he's in his reload animation and the enemy is close enough to push him before he can shoot again. Then, once again, he has a bullet in the chamber and he re-peeks. Take a moment to listen to the sound here as he does this. Did you hear that? We heard the enemy Sage reload her gun on the left side. We now know Sage pushed out of screens and is on the left side. He holds the angle to see if she re-peeks it, but then his teammate dies, and if we glance at the minimap, we can see where Sage is. This makes it much easier to land this shot since we can anticipate where the enemy will be. He's now in a 1v1 against Cypher, but has the advantage since the spike is already planted. And it's here we get a wonderful lesson in how to play perfectly around a planted spike on attackers. He listens for the enemy to defuse, then moves and takes a shot. This is actually done purposely to reveal to the opponent where he is. Now with the opponent focused on that location, he repositions. Again, he hears the defuse and does a quick jiggle peek pre-firing. This is simply to force the opponent off the defuse while keeping himself as safe as possible. He then waits for the enemy to defuse again, and jiggle peek pre-fires off of it to land a nasty headshot. Heading into round 4, we learn one of the most valuable tactics when on the attacking team. Notice how TenZ's entire team is stacking to attack a site. Again, we don't need 5 players to attack a site, so he goes mid to look for a pick. This then puts him close enough to rotate to help his team shortly after. However, we then get into a super common problem you'll face in your own games. Your team is executing onto a site, but everyone is alive and you're trailing behind them. You do not want to enter site in this scenario. Your teammates have all the angles covered at this point and you'll just be overlapping with each other. Instead, as the last man in, notice how TenZ falls back to hold the flank. This is exactly what you should be doing when you're the last man entering a site as attackers and your team already has control of the site. By doing this, he's able to be way more helpful, even securing a free kill on the enemy jet. However, right after, we see TenZ make a super common mistake over-peeking on his second shot. Keep in mind, when TenZ took his first shot, the gunshot would have notified the enemy team where he was playing. At the same time, look at the minimap. With 4 enemies still alive, none are showing in vision of his teammates. This re-peek was far too aggressive, and instead he should have just fell back just a little bit to hold a new angle, buying time and playing around the planted spike. In fact, he almost ended up losing the round off of this mistake and has to rely on his team to clutch it. Skipping ahead to round 8, we see a fantastic counter by the opponent to TenZ's A push. TenZ on Viper, along with Brimstone, are easily smoking out ramps in heaven. So how does the enemy Raze counter this? Holding an off angle outside of the Viper wall with an operator. This is so smart, since TenZ and his team have become confident that they don't have to check ramp or heaven. At the same time, they want to walk when moving around this corner, not to reveal their exact location to the enemy. A player walking around a corner is one of the easiest targets to hit with an operator, so Raze is basically using the Viper wall against them. by baiting them into thinking they're safe and instead playing an off angle. It just goes to show that when an enemy is having success with a strategy, how you need to try to switch things up to catch them off guard. And on that note, jumping to round 11, we can see TenZ using the same advice of switching things up. Their A pushes just haven't been successful the past few rounds, so they look to focus getting control of mid again. Notice how they aren't hard committing, they are being patient and specifically baiting out the enemy's abilities, which we know as TenZ actually said this was his plan on stream. Then, once the enemy stage slow expires, he activates his Viper smoke and begins lurking forward a bit, and actually ends up on top of Sage's wall. This ends up creating a fantastic opportunity for an unexpected peek on the enemy. Hold on, now I want you to tell me, where are the last 3 opponents on the enemy team? Well, we killed Cypher, and it's standard for Cypher to hold B site solo, so B site should be empty. We also killed Sage, who was holding B heaven at mid. We know the enemy was playing 2A, and one was likely in vents mid, possibly in B heaven. With how split is laid out, it means there are only 2 places the enemy can come from, either through mid or from CT spawn. We see how his entire team has mid covered, but no one is watching CT spawn. This is how TenZ knows to rotate to watch CT spawn and ends up catching 2 enemies in their rotation. In this gunfight, he also uses a great technique known as spray transferring. Once he kills the first enemy, he doesn't have time to wait for his accuracy to reset and then shoot again as he's out in the open. Instead, he continues his spray and transfers that spray onto the next enemy. Alright, so the first half has now ended and it's time for the teams to switch sides. It's on defense that Viper has an amazing one-way smoke that honestly is half the reason she's so strong on this map right now. Make sure to hold crouch and line up so you're on the second step in the middle of the dark line. Then, while still holding crouch, look up so you're at the halfway mark of this beam, lined up vertically with this corner. By moving to the back of the wall in B heaven and crouching, you'll be able to see the enemy's feet when they push up mid, allowing you to shoot them while they can't even see you. However, despite this, they still lose the next 2 rounds, and at this point you're probably wondering, why in the world did we choose this game as it's 3-11 for the enemy? Well, spoiler alert, they actually do a great job trying to bring it back, showing how a game is never truly lost until the end screen. On round 15, he uses the standard Viper one-way smoke. However, the enemy smokes him off, leaving him without vision. This means the enemy could easily push through mid to vents to A site. This is such a common scenario players find themselves in, holding an angle that's smoked out. Here's the thing, Sage is also holding this angle, so he's basically useless holding B heaven with Sage since it's currently smoked. This is how he knows he needs to preemptively rotate, anticipating the mid to A push through vents. This allows him to defend A heaven. Again, we see that same technique of spray transferring when exposed to multiple enemies at once instead of letting your accuracy reset. It's these 2 kills that secure his team the round, which just goes to show how important preemptively rotating can be. Next round, we see TenZ switch it up again, with an interesting aggressive strategy with Viper on defense. He instantly releases the smoke into then activating it while looking for an aggressive peek on the right side of mid. This not only lets him catch the enemy by surprise, getting an unexpected kill, but more importantly, use the smoke as cover to protect himself from other potential enemies. On the next round, take note of how he doesn't try the same strategy again, and instead falls back to his default one-way smoke. This is so important when it comes to aggressive pushes on defense. Don't just keep doing it round after round, as the enemy will simply catch on and you'll become predictable. On round 19, we then see another adjustment that TenZ makes. You see, the enemy has kept smoking him out, making his one-way smoke essentially useless. So he adapts and instantly throws a smoke on the stairs mid. This prevents the mid push into vents and allows him to get into a position where he can make a pick on one of the enemies trying to push through it. Again, this concept of changing things up when a strategy you're using isn't working and adapting to the enemy. One thing that TenZ is amazing at is how he preemptively rotates on defense. He starts the round looking for the standard one-way smoke. The enemy Brimstone then smokes him out, so he throws the smoke on the stairs mid. He then follows this up with Viper Poison to hold a possible further push. It's at this point, Cypher calls out 1B, and TenZ begins rotating. Keep in mind, his teammate Sage is still holding mid, and it makes more sense for 2 people to be watching B for a possible push there than for 2 people to be staring at a Brimstone smoke mid. He then spots 2B on the minimap, and so commits to holding B site while leaving Sage to hold mid. He then hears gunfire mid, and so immediately activates his smoke on stairs. Take note of how he's communicating to his teammates each time his smoke is activated and when it's deactivated.
They come in. I'm smoking mid.
Now at this point, there's 50 seconds left in the round, and the enemy still hasn't executed mid or B. Additionally, his teammate Raze preemptively rotated off of A site to B site. This means there's only one teammate on a site. In the higher ranks, enemies will be aware that if they take too long to execute on a site, the enemy will have likely rotated over, so they'll fall back and look to execute on the other side of the map. TenZ is anticipating this and so preemptively rotates A. Sure enough, he was right, and the enemy begins their execute on A site. His teammate Raze dies in heaven and spots two enemies pushing ramp. At this point, things look terrible for TenZ. He's smoked off at screens, and trying to retake heaven solo will be difficult since he knows two enemies are there. And here we see a trademark TenZ push through the smoke, catching the opponent off guard and getting him a kill. Pushing through smokes is something TenZ loves to do, but he doesn't just run through, he actually uses a specific technique to make it work. First, he makes sure to walk through the smoke to get to the middle of it and hide his footsteps. He then listened for footsteps from the enemy so he could tell where they are. This lets him pre-aim his crosshair at a likely location the enemy will be when he moves out of the smoke. It's at this point that he runs out of the smoke, and this is so important. If he had just walked out, the enemy would have had plenty of time to spot his gun coming out of the smoke and react. But by first walking into the smoke, the enemy doesn't know he's there, and then he can listen to identify where the enemy will be. Then by running out of it, he gives the enemy almost no time to react. This really illustrates the proper way to push out of smokes. In round 23, we see him switch things up again, this time looking to op mid. This is for a very specific reason. He hit tab at the start of the round and saw the enemy was low on credits and would have to save. This allows him to hold a more aggressive angle at the start of the round with the operator with a very low risk, given that the enemy will likely only have sheriffs. A lot of the time when you have a gun advantage on the enemy team, you want to look to take long distance fights to leverage this fact. Now check out how tight of an angle TenZ holds with the operator. Holding tight angles like this is best done when you want to minimize your chances of dying, as well as your priority being gaining information. In this case, the enemy is on a save round and TenZ has an operator. There are two enemies alive with 4 of his teammates. There's no need for TenZ to take risks. Instead, he knows to hold tight angles to minimize the chances of him dying to a sheriff and losing his operator, while still gaining valuable info on whether the enemy is mid. Moving into the next round, we see how TenZ switches up his playstyle now that he has an operator. No longer will he go with the one-way smoke, since that's best used with a gun that can spray down enemies. He instead looks to hold an angle on the left side of mid. This is because he can get to this angle before the enemy attackers can. However, after a bit of time has passed, it's possible for the enemy to have sneaked up the right side of mid, so he throws a smoke and backs off. He then hears gunshots in B main and preemptively rotates. Again, we want to make it clear his teammate Sage is still holding mid, which is what allows him to pivot off. If Sage wasn't holding mid, he'd be much less willing to rotate off, since he would leave mid to be completely open for the enemy to push. And by preemptively rotating, he's now in position to help Cypher defend the site. Notice how every time he takes an op shot, he's going to retreat to cover, preventing the enemy from spamming him down with a rifle. This kiting back after each shot is such an important technique to master with the operator when in these kinds of hectic fights. And it's at this point TenZ has actually tied up the game 12-12 and brought it to sudden death. So it's the final round, winner takes all. He begins by playing in vents, and we can see a nice trick that often nets you a kill. He's holding the headshot angle for enemies pushing out of the right side of mid. Now, as soon as the smoke goes down, and just as he's smoked out, he shoots a burst of bullets. It doesn't get him a kill this time, but this is a really good habit to get into. Often enemies will push out once the smoke lands, so by timing your shots when the smoke lands, you can often catch enemies with a headshot even though you're blinded by the smoke. Once the enemy smoke expires, he throws his own Viper smoke down to help gain control of mid and delay a possible push by the enemy. And here we see a very similar scenario to earlier, where now all of a sudden we don't hear or see any enemies mid. Cypher gets to pick B, and now the call is for everyone to just play passive. They have the number advantage, so just hold your positions, there's no need to push out. Unfortunately, his teammate Brimstone doesn't get the memo and pushes aggressively, dying to Raze. Now, TenZ only has one teammate holding A, and with no enemies mid, he rotates off to fill the gap. The enemy smokes out heaven, and it looks like they're looking to execute on A's site. We see him once again looking to push through the smoke. He walks into it and listens, along with checking his minimap for his Raze spotting any enemies. He doesn't hear anything or see anything on the minimap, which means the enemy isn't pushing into A's site. However, they could be pushing ramps into heaven, so this is where he focuses attention on, and a good lesson on how to use logical deduction to predict the enemy's movements. He spots Raze going to ropes, and with only 20 seconds left, Cypher spots the enemies in B main, and it's definitely an execute on B site, so he looks to rotate as fast as he can. Now, check out how good his map awareness is. He gets the immediate pick on Brimstone in B, but then instantly rotates to check behind him. Remember, he knows from earlier that Raze went ropes, and so he should be looking to flank behind them. He checks it, then turns back around to look for a pick on B's site and throws a Viper poison. However, after this, he instantly goes back to looking behind him. Strange, still no Raze. The only place he hasn't checked is up close in the nearby corner, and sure enough, he catches Raze. Now, after this pick, it's 3 versus 2, and he has to retake B's site. We first spot Jett, and then as we push, we can see Cypher spots the enemy Sage on the minimap. Great, we now know where the last 2 enemies are. When executing a retake, you always want to time your pushes together. Notice how each teammate is entering the site at the same time. This will help them trade out kills if one of them dies. Cypher gets the kill on Sage, which then leaves us with a 1v1 against Jett. With the score tied 12-12, this 1v1 will decide the entire game. TenZ tries a nice tactic with Viper, using the wall to sneak up on the enemy and then dropping the wall once he's in position. However, to his surprise, Jett isn't there. At this point, Jett is either behind this wall to the left or the wall to the right. Jett then surprises him with a peek and gets the kill to cement the win for the enemy team. Wow, it can't get any closer than that. What do you guys think of how TenZ played in this 1v1 at the end? Would you have played it different? If so, how? Let us know in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and like the video to get more guides that truly help you improve at Valorant every single day. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and good luck, good half, and good game.